As they say on Twitter, Bitcoin fixes everything. Hello and welcome to the Neighborhood Money Podcast, a video podcast here to help you build a life you deserve. I'm Cavan, that's Drew, and today we're talking all about proof of work, the system that truly makes Bitcoin operate in the way that it does. Drew, Bitcoin and the crypto market right now has bounced up a little bit. A lot of people had been saying that it's dead, that it's in a bear market, but we've seen a slight bounce. So for me as a Bitcoin saver or investor, I'm pretty fired up about it. So I think that this episode is pretty timely as people might be starting to get more interested into Bitcoin, specifically as they see Bitcoin rise in price.
Very timely episode, in my opinion. Bitcoin is something that we've been talking about. Cryptocurrencies is something that we've been talking about a lot lately. But, I've been seeing a lot of technical analysis on the graph of Bitcoin, and that's pretty much you're just looking at a graph and picking certain points of bottoms or tops for price ranges. And some people are seeing a lot of triple bottoms, which tend to have a upward swing in price. It happened a little bit sooner than I thought, and I think the next level we want to be around 25,000 and be able to hold around that for the Bitcoin price. I was kind of hoping that it would still come back down to like those 18,000 again, because that was really enticing prices. But with all that said, it's been a constant learning curve for me these last couple of years. The more I get into it, the more I learn, the more questions I have. And the way proof of work works is something that I've been trying to learn recently. And we wrote a little blog article on our website about it too. So if anybody wants to read that, they can see it. So I'm hoping that we can find a way to introduce proof of work, as well as being able to summarize it and make it easily digestible for listeners.
I'm glad that you brought up the article that you wrote and is out there. If you guys want to check that out, we'll have that available on this episode in the description below. It's on our Twitter feed, etc. But it does go into a ton of details, and we're going to go through all of that here today. So buckle up, because it's going to be a heck of a ride. It's going to be fun. Drew and I are very passionate about at least learning about Bitcoin, but me more specifically, I'll speak for myself. I'm very passionate about Bitcoin. I'm a true believer in it. So I think, Drew, the natural first place to start is, what the heck is Bitcoin? And I know we've talked about it in past episodes, but at its very fundamental level, Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency, the first cryptocurrency that ever existed. And what that means is that it's a currency that's digital and it uses cryptography for its security. And you're probably thinking, well, what the hell is cryptography? Well, I can tell you it in a very simple sentence. It's basically security that is done through mathematical algorithms, and computers need to solve these mathematical algorithms to make sure that Bitcoin is secure and operates as it should be. And one really nice thing, Drew, about Bitcoin is that it is a currency. It's a way to send value in this digital age. So if in the past, if you wanted to send money from, say, me to you, but you lived across the world over in China, well, I would have to go to my bank. My bank would have to talk with your bank. Then they would have to open up payment streams using another party, and you would have all these different parties. And with having all these different parties, you have things such as higher fees, multiple ledger transactions. Well, now in the new cryptocurrency space, specifically in Bitcoin, because we're going to talk about proof of work today, that doesn't happen anymore. If I want to send you money, if I want to send you Bitcoin, all that has to happen is I have to go into my wallet, and then I send it to your address, and then you get it on your address. And then it's verified through the proof of work system. And so you eliminate all of those independent parties, and we can send value, we can send money across the world wherever you have access to internet and a device in basically the blink of an eye at very, very extremely low fees.
The biggest thing for me with the Bitcoin is it's decentralized. It's not run and owned by any certain person. It's run by a bunch of different people that are incentivized to make it trustworthy. I think that Michael Saylor said it's an imperfect machine. It's a perfect machine that uses imperfect parts. So it's like all these imperfect parts somehow correlate into now making this like the perfect running machine. And with that happening, those incentives to constantly prove Bitcoin and using this proof of work system, you're pretty much, the more I read into it, just more and more uncorruptible, which I think is huge because the biggest thing right now is you always think about the printing of money or these back end deals, and maybe there's these corruptions. And depending on who it makes look better, who's in office, they'll use that as ammo. Where Bitcoin can be something of it's nobody's company. It's nobody's really currency. Oh, it's everybody's currency is what
Right,
it is.
right. It's
So
the people's
I
currency.
think I think that is some of the coolest things for me. And as I've looked into that and you hear proof of work, that's when I've gotten into more research. And I'm by no means an expert, but I'm trying to be more and more knowledgeable on the subject.
Bitcoin presents a trustless payment system. Right now, in the current system, you have to trust banks, you have to trust credit cards, and they have to trust you so that the system works. Where in Bitcoin, it's trustless and it's verified through the proof of work system. So, Drew, let's go right into proof of work. Uh, I thought it was super interesting when you put this out in your article, but you actually started it off by saying who invented proof of work and why it was invented. So how was proof of work invented and who was it by?
Yeah. Yeah, this was new to me. So whenever I've heard of proof of work, it's been synonymous with Bitcoin. And so I always thought when Bitcoin was created, that Satoshi Nakamoto, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but I always thought he was the one that came up with proof of work. And as I found out, back in 1993, there were two people wanted that kind of wrote about proof of work, and it was only a concept, but it was for preventing all these spam attacks. It was more or less pushed towards emails, so they wanted it where you'd have this proof of work of people having to do a little bit of work or solve a little bit of puzzles to be able to make sure that that email can go through to you. And by doing that, it would disincentivize the spammers to send all this out because it would take too long and it'd be too costly for them. So that was only in concept. And then what I have on here, yeah, back in 97, then there was another guy that decided to talk about proof of work a little bit more, and it was still kind of going after some spam type of products and kind of more corruption, denial of service products. But that was again only in concept, and not until Bitcoin was created is when it was actually put into play and actually put into can't think of the word right now, but it was actually in use by Bitcoin.
And it is truly the foundation to which Bitcoin is successful, and Bitcoin is what Bitcoin is. You might hear things such as proof of stake in the cryptocurrency world, where some coins like Ethereum, Ether have a proof of, or is moving to a proof of stake. You have other coins like Cardano, Drew, I think Avalanche. I'm not as familiar with these other coins, but they work on a proof of stake system, meaning that rather than proof of work, and we're going to get here, but I'm going to jump the gun a little bit. Proof of work is basically doing the work to prove transactions, whereas a proof of stake is you're just putting a certain amount of the currency, the token, you're staking it so that there's liquidity in the market. And so so the difference, so really when take a step back and I look at the difference is in the proof of work system for Bitcoin, you're not creating any more tokens. You are truly just verifying the work. But Drew, let me stop there and we'll just go right into it. And I'll just ask you the question: what it exactly is proof of work?
I think the simplest way I can think about proof of work is it's a group of people, or you might hear them as like nodes or miners, are there to solve a puzzle. And it's mathematical, as Cavan said, cryptography. So it's a bunch of people rushing and competing to solve one puzzle. And then when one person solves that puzzle, it's able to create this new block or transaction, and the rest of the community can then validate that and say, yep, this is correct. We can move forward to starting or mining the next block. So as I said, the easiest way is a group of people solving a puzzle.
And when we say a group of people, we're talking computers across the world are solving this. They have mining farms that have hundreds of computers, or you can even go to like Drew and I, we could run our own mining system on one single computer. But it is all of these computers agreeing to that the fact that the puzzle was solved by a specific computer or person, and then that's verified and put onto the ledger, the blockchain, Bitcoin's blockchain. And Drew, actually, I think what's super interesting is when we talk, you talk a little bit about miners, and the reason people might be thinking like, why the heck are Bitcoin miners called miners? Well, it stems from mining gold, and so obviously if you go and mine gold, you're a miner, and gold used to be as a used as a currency, whereas now it's basically the same thing, except for rather than going out with dynamite, a shovel, trucks, whatever it might be to get gold, you're just using your computer to go out, solve these equations, these mathematical equations, to prove that a transaction is legit. And then in turn, for solving those equations, you actually mine, you get Bitcoin paid to you from the Bitcoin network. And I think that is just absolutely fascinating that it incentivizes miners to make sure that they do solve these equations so that the system can work, the ledger can work, but they're also incentivized because of how Bitcoin has been set up.
That's a great way to put it in perspective, is talking about the gold miners. When you're looking at a crypto miner, I mean, you can think of them as, if you're wanting to be a miner, whether it be gold or Bitcoin, you have to decide what equipment you want to get. You decide after where you have to go. And that's kind of the same with crypto, as you decide what equipment you want to go mine. You can decide where it is you want to mine that. And then you're just competing against all these other types of people. So back in a gold rush in California, you had so many people coming to California to search for the best location for the gold. Then they were incentivized because once they found the gold, because there was demand for it, they were able to then take it to market. And you'd have somebody that might be biting the gold to prove, like, yep, this is actually gold. We'll give you some money for it, and we'll be able to put this onto the regular market for it to be transacted between the community.
Exactly. And the difference though between gold and Bitcoin is that gold is essentially a resource where there's really no limit to the amount that's there. Obviously, there's only so much gold on Earth, but it's going to be very challenging to get all of that gold up and used in the economy because there's a ton out there. And if you really want to get meta true, you can go to other planets and get gold. Whereas Bitcoin is a finite amount of Bitcoin. And so there's going to become a time when there's no more Bitcoins to be mined. However, there will still be incentives for these miners to make sure that these transactions are legit, and that will be through fees and things like that, which will be very, very small when you compare them to fees of today.
And then as we talk about this proof of work and this competition between other types of miners, I think one of the coolest things that I've found out as my research has gone on has been just how smart these algorithms actually are. So if there's a puzzle that's extremely difficult to solve in real time, this algorithm will make it easier so that these blocks can be created in a reasonable amount of time. I think when it initially started, probably somewhere in like the 15-minute type of mark. So I think that's really cool. So if you expand on that, if you were a person that wanted to buy up all the best mining things and you wanted to make, you know, get the be the person that solves it the quickest, then it also does it in real time too, where it starts making it a little bit more difficult. So then these other people have these chances to get into it instead of your computers being able to know exactly what to do and solve these puzzles in the nick of time.
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting and outstanding actually that it exists and it operates the way that it does. To give you guys a little context around when we're talking about these mathematical equations, one way that I like to think about it is if you think about 100 different placeholders for a number. So there's 100 placeholders for numbers and each placeholder can range from 0 up until 9. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all the way up till 9, and then you have 100 of those. Well, there's going to be a specific type of number, in that 100 placeholders, so for example, like 1, 5, 8, 2, 7, all the way through. And that's going to be the code that these computers are solving for. And so as you can see, it's going to take an enormous amount of time because the only way that these computers can solve these equations are to guess and check. So they start with, 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 1, 0 0 0 0 0 0 2, and they go through all of this. And so it takes an enormous amount of computing power to go through all of these different numbers to try to crack that code. So I know that's really confusing when people ask me, well, what the heck is this mathematical algorithm that they're solving? Is it calculus? Is it college algebra? What is it? It's a very simple, just guess and check numbers, but it's more complex than what I just said, but it gives you a general idea of the complexities or the type of algorithm that are actually being solved for by miners.
Yeah, and so then as we talk about these miners, really, and it's like, uh, what are some of these requirements exactly of these miners? Like, how would you get into mining? Do you feel like you can't be a miner? And the cool thing, as we talked about, this being decentralized peer to peer, is really anybody can go be a miner. You just need a computer, you need the certain software, and you need a Bitcoin wallet. And that's something that is easily had, and almost anybody can get all of those. As far as the software, as far as the Bitcoin wallet, I mean, those things are pretty much free. At least the Bitcoin wallet for sure is. And computer, I'm sure you probably already have one of those.
You will need a pretty fast computer if you want to be successful. And another thing to consider is what are the requirements to be a miner is, and we'll probably get into this here in a little bit, but it's the energy use that you have. And so for most people, if you're just using your home energy, it doesn't make sense to mine Bitcoin because you're going to mine Bitcoin for the basically for the price that you're going to buy it for. So, for example, if Bitcoin would cost $20,000 to buy one Bitcoin, for you to mine one Bitcoin will be roughly around $20,000. And so it doesn't necessarily incentivize you to buy or to mine Bitcoin, but it does incentivize people that have cheaper electricity to buy Bitcoin. We'll get into that here in the advantages in a bit, but that's just something to consider that if you are thinking about mining Bitcoin at home, just know that it is not as advantageous using your own electricity at home than it would be for other people that are taking advantage of things like solar, wind farms, even down to fossil fuel emissions from those companies.
Yeah, I think the energy is one of the big talking points right now with Bitcoin is these proof of works. Proof of work, it's seems to be uncorruptible and it seems to be efficient, but it doesn't necessarily seem to be energy efficient at the moment. At least that's how they portray it. I think if you were to I've seen some people put it into perspective and put in calculations where it's actually better than a lot of other types of energies. But anyways, with it taking up so much energy and not being as green, there are the concern where some people don't want to mine as much anymore, and they're trying to figure out ways to make it more advantageous to be able to do that. So I think just a tweet recently, and we'll probably get to it later on, but uh, Tesla sold 75% of their Bitcoin, and the reasoning behind it from Elon Musk was it wasn't energy sustainable to continue to uh, mine all these Bitcoin, and he didn't want that read on his ledger apparently. But so that's one thing to think about, as Kevin was saying, is that it does use quite a bit of energy. And I'm sure there'll be some workarounds here in the future where it makes it more and more efficient and using less and less energy.
So, just to recap before we go into the advantages and the disadvantages of the proof of work system, what exactly is proof of work? Well, it is the underlying framework of Bitcoin. It is a way to make sure and to verify that transactions between two people are legit and are documented onto the blockchain, onto the Bitcoin ledger. And that is done through the proof of work system, meaning that there are computers and people around the world, millions of them, running computer software to crack the Bitcoin code that then verifies that these transactions exist. And the miners is what they're called. They get a little kickback for doing that work. So, if I could put it, Drew, into one sentence, it's basically people around the world verifying that a transaction between two people exists, and then they document that onto a public ledger. So I think that's a pretty good place to go into the advantages and disadvantages, because there definitely, as everything else in this world, are advantages and disadvantages. So, Drew, what are some of the advantages of the proof of work system?
Well, they say that part of the proof of work system is it is more secure than these other types. We've talked about proof of stake, and sometimes with that proof of stake, it's you're holding your coins in pretty much a safety deposit box. And when a transaction or new block is created, they might send they might send that transaction to a validator, somebody that's holding that staked coin in a safety deposit box, and they have to then agree upon it if it's good or it's bad. And if they will try going fraudulently, then the coin itself can, or the people in charge of the coin can then say, all right, that's fraudulent. These deposited coins that you have, we're going to take away because it's going to be a penalty. So it is a monetary incentive for them to be trustworthy, but there are the chances of it being not as secure because you're sending it to one validator or making sure if it can be correct or not.
Which is very similar to what we are in the fiat world, or in the US dollar world. That is a very similar proof of stake concept. You have validators, meaning you have the banks, you have the federal government, and they determine whether transactions are legit or not. Drew, what's another advantage for the proof of work system?
Yeah, you said it earlier in this episode. For the most part, trustless. Like these miners don't have to trust each other. They just have to be able to go out and solve this mathematical equation. Where in the fiat world, like we're talking about, it is trust. Like you have to trust that the bank is going to work in your best favor. You have to make sure that the transaction going through is going to actually be legit, and the people that have the actual money and everything. So I think being able to worry about not trusting somebody, but still trusting the actual currency is actually huge. And it doesn't seem to make sense, but it makes sense.
So, Drew, you talked a little bit about energy before, but how does proof of work stack up and come when we think about energy in comparison to other types of frameworks like proof of stake or proof of activity?
Yeah, as far as the energy efficiency side of it, it's more on, I think, the people putting the time into the actual validation, where it's the proof of work is a lot more on the computing side. You kind of have a computer there that's going to be doing that. So when I'm saying it's more energy efficient, it's more as like your human energy getting put into it, where it's a computer doing most of the work for you. Whereas a proof of stake, as another chance, it's the work of actually sending this validation out to somebody else. They have to go through it and say, "Yep, this is correct." No, it's fraudulent. So there's a little bit more work humanly energy put into it than you would the other way. So it might have sound confusing if you read the article that being more energy efficient. It's not necessarily saying, like how much energy your house uses, but it's like how much energy you actually have to put into it.
So I'll add two things that didn't make the list on the energy front. The first one being that Bitcoin, it does get a bad press on, oh, it's using up so much energy. It's bad for the environment, where actually it uses 60% renewable energy. And that's the most amount of renewable energy used by any given commodity. So it's up and beyond everything else for using renewable energy. And the thing about Bitcoin is that it incentivizes renewable energy because it can be cheaper than alternative energy sources. And then I think another thing, Drew, that blew my mind when I heard this, and this was probably a year or so ago, but Bitcoin, because it's anywhere in the world, you, as long as you have access to internet and you have a device, so internet Starlink, meaning that you can get internet anywhere now, and you can have a device that's relatively cheap and expensive these days. You can actually sell energy from anywhere in the world that's never been tapped before, and actually be monetized for that. So one great example that I've heard is, think about if you go into a jungle and there's a huge waterfall. Well, all of a sudden you build a rig that takes that energy from the waterfall, powers up your Bitcoin mining rig, and all of a sudden now you are mining Bitcoin. And so you're selling that energy on the Bitcoin network to verify these transactions. And so that to me just blew my mind, that you could essentially get energy anywhere in the world to prop up this system.
Yeah, that is actually wild. Like when I heard you saying that, it makes me be like, almost makes my brain hurt. But it's really crazy, and, if I could just, like, wrap up probably these, like, the last 3 advantages we have, I think they all kind of go together as one, is for one is, like, it's decentralized, and with it be decentralized, it's, like, it's, like, censorship free, and with that too, it's, like, very transparent. So those are like the 3 last advantages, but with it with the part of it being decentralized and censorship, I think is extremely huge, where a lot of these other cryptos out there are pretty much run by somebody. So if they want to do something with the liquidity, they want to do some type of like upgrade, or they want to shut some things down, that can happen, and with that being there, there's the risk of them being potentially considered a security, and that means they have to be more regulated, and that might be saying what people can and cannot go into these certain types of securities. uh, so I think that is huge, where you don't really have that censorship. I think the times when you've heard people say there's censorship, it's actually talking about a crypto exchange and not the actual crypto itself. So if you were to buy something on a centralized exchange, like let's say Coinbase, they're not necessarily your coins, because you don't actually have the block approval validation keys for that thing. So when you hear the censorship with Bitcoin, it's not that actually you buying the Bitcoin and somebody taking it away from you. It's pretty much going on a centralized exchange, and somebody's pretty much borrowing you these Bitcoins.
Yeah, it's basically like the banking system without the FDIC insurance, is how it really comes down to. Specifically, now that we're in a bear market, you're seeing some of these exchanges go bankrupt, And basically they're saying, hey, these weren't actually your Bitcoin. This actually is not your cryptocurrency. It was ours. Like, we're not going to give you it back. Or, in bankruptcy, they might give you some of it back, but they're not going to give it all back to you because it actually isn't yours. You don't own the keys. And we won't dive into the keys and all that because that gets very complicated. But just know that if you are buying Bitcoin on an exchange and you don't have your own keys, then you are at risk for that third party risk of those exchanges going under. So yeah, Drew, that wraps up the advantages. Obviously, there's a lot more out there than we didn't talk about today, but the proof of work advantages. Let's move now to the disadvantages because every system definitely has disadvantages. So, Drew, what are some of the disadvantages to proof of work?
Yeah, the biggest one we've said multiple times here is just the energy it takes to actually create to mine a new uh, a block. And these are the energies that we're talking about that maybe like your house uses or like your business will end up using. And so I think one little mining rig, I think they're saying uses almost what a house and a half uses in one day. So like every day that mining thing's trying to compute something that's using about what a house and a half uses every single day, which is equivalent. So if you've ever seen pictures of these mining rigs, I mean, they'll be like this little big and they'll have hundreds and thousands of them. So it actually uses quite a bit of energy, even though Cavan said part of the advantage is it's renewable, 6% is renewable, but still it uses a lot of energy. So you have to be able to find that somewhere, whether it's on your normal city grid or if it's on a renewable resource. It's something that you do have to think about.
To be honest, Drew, energy is one of the things that I've been deep diving into probably in the last like 3 or 4 weeks, specifically when it comes to Bitcoin. And it's pretty fascinating, the topic. And I'm not going to go all nerdy out on it because I think that we're going to lose people real fast. But, when I look at these disadvantages of energy for proof of work system, I kind of like tilt my head and say, well, is that necessarily true? Because you're technically, yes, you're using energy, but it's what use case is that energy being used for, right? Is the use of that energy valid? Is it necessary? Is it important? And I think you and I would both agree that using energy for Bitcoin specifically is probably a really, really, really good thing. And so while it is energy intensive, like I said, 60% is renewables. It's very efficient. They're also using energy, or Bitcoin miners are using energy like methane from fossil fuel companies. So the exhaust that usually just goes right up into the atmosphere, they're using that as an energy source. So it actually it does a lot for things of, if you think about like global warming, climate change. It is solving some of those major issues, and unfortunately, you don't see that in the mainstream media, and it just shows the negative light of how much energy is actually being used, not where it's being sourced from.
Yeah, and that's one of those things of being an early adopter and Bitcoin's so very early in its age or really early in its lifespan. And right now when you have centralized media or you have big media or you have people that haven't done enough research into what Bitcoin and crypto can actually do for the future, I don't know if they're necessarily doing it maliciously, but I also don't know if they have done enough research to really see why they're saying what they're saying. They might just have these talking points. And, there was some videos I've seen in the past of people talking about what the internet is and what email is and what an at symbol is. And they've made that seem like the most foreign thing ever. And those are just normal talking heads that you would see on the television that you might have trusted. But I don't think malicious. It's just they haven't adopted enough and there hasn't been enough research into it yet.
For sure, for sure. All right, Drew, what's a couple more disadvantage of the proof of work?
Yeah, the next two, I think are pretty much have to be said, but the chances of them actually being a huge disadvantage, probably is not a great chance of that. So, like, one of them would be the risk of a centralization of these miners. So, if people have a lot more money than these other people, then they're going to have a lot more rigs and they're going to have a lot bigger places to hold all of these mining rigs. So if you have a bunch of these, you're probably going to be getting more and more of these bitcoins. And some people might say, like, I don't have as much power as these big dogs, so why would I even try? So it kind of makes it only like some of the big people doing the actual mining itself. But the chances of that centralization, I think there's a point of where it's almost diminishing returns of how big they get, and to what these algorithms will push out for problem solving. So there's that, but so I think centralization is one thing that could potentially, but not likely, be a
I
disadvantage.
think to be clear though, it's not centralization of the Bitcoin network, it's the centralization of who's mining the Bitcoin. So, for example, if a miner has 10,000 rigs versus a miner that has 10 rigs, obviously the miner with more rigs is going to have more of the Bitcoin because they're going to be able to solve those mathematical equations faster because they just have more power. However, each one of those mining rigs is independent of each other. And even if that one person with the 10,000 rigs try to cheat the system, that person with the 10 mining rigs can say, hey, no, actually, this isn't true. You're rigging the system. So it's still completely decentralized. But yeah, I totally agree that it's going to be a higher barrier to entry if you want to get into Bitcoin mining.
And so then, like, going on to the last part, this is one thing I didn't know until I was writing this, was there's a thing called the 51% attack. So there's a chance for, if there was somebody to own like 51% of the supply of this, that they could potentially make some fraudulent coins or transactions that they could kind of control a little bit. But that Satoshi that started Bitcoin, in his thoughts of it, it was, he assumed that this would like never happen because it would be way too expensive, way too costly, and it just wouldn't make sense. So the chances of it actually happening, the guy that created it said, are just about none. So, but there is the chance of that being, or that was theoretically, there's that chance.
You know, we didn't talk about this, and it's actually a very important part of Bitcoin's history and a very fascinating part. So, Satoshi Nakamoto is unknown. No one actually knows who he is. So, the creator of Bitcoin, no one knows who that is.
It could be a
It could be a
person, it could
person.
be a group. We don't
Exactly.
know.
Man, woman, group. No one has a clue. This person or group of people created Bitcoin and then they just disappeared. And because they just disappeared, it created this system that is unbelievable. And some people argue that it's the greatest invention for I can't even remember what the last one is, but since the internet and even before then, because it's probably since like gold, what like the gold standard was established. But it's a fascinating part of Bitcoin's history that the actual inventor of it, no one knows who it is. At least no one has come out in the public and admitted they know who it is. That is verifiable. There's definitely people that have come out and been like, "Hey, I'm actually Satoshi Nakamoto," and no, you're not. And that's, but yeah. I just thought I'd throw that in there because I think it's a pretty fascinating part of Bitcoin's history.
That's extremely fascinating. That was one of the things I found amazing about this, is somebody that was uh so for this Bitcoin, and he believed in it so much, but he believed in it being decentralized. He didn't believe anybody should be, one person should be owning this. And when he wrote the white paper, which is basically just talking about what this project is and what it can do, he had those, a couple blogs, and then it just went radio silent. And people speculate he passed away. People speculate who it might have been, but at the end of the day, nobody knows. So this person or group of people could be dead, they could be alive. Uh, but the fact that it was made, set up, and just kind of run by the community is amazing.
Yeah, and it's grown. I mean, we talked about at the beginning of the episode the fact that it's, it dove down into the bear market that we're in, it from a high of 69 down to, I think right now we're sitting around 23,000 per Bitcoin. But the fact that it's at $23,000 per Bitcoin in the last 10 to 12 years is absolutely fascinating. And like Michael Saylor said, if Bitcoin's not going to zero, it's going to go to a million because at some point in time there's going to be no new bitcoins, and so it's only going to go up in value as more dollars exist in our economy. But that's more.
I was just say the one thing it is funny, like you talking about it being 23,000, and there's some people that I talk to, and I'll say something with Bitcoin. They're like, "Oh, isn't it doing like super super bad?" And it's just one of those things where you got to zoom out and take perspective of this. Like, if you were to buy Bitcoin back in say like 2018, you would have been getting Bitcoin for like between like five and $7,000. And right now, with everybody saying it's doing extremely poorly, it's still going for $23,000. So like, there's still a great return when people say it's doing bad and it's going away forever. And I think it's just like scare tactics where people just have to be able to actually look at the Bitcoin itself and zoom out on the graph and actually see what it's done. And the fact that it's gone up to 69,000 is unbelievable.
Man, I just want to nerd out so much about Bitcoin and actually how strong the system is right now with all of the crap that has gone on in the past like 6 or so months. I'll save the listeners from that. Maybe we'll have an episode on that in the future because it's very detailed and it gets very complicated very quickly.
I have to say, it's kind of funny. There's some people in my circle that I'll talk to, and they almost like heckle me, or they almost kind of make me feel like I'm the dumb one for like talking about Bitcoin. And there's like, oh, Bitcoin just so stupid. Like, I don't know why you're loving it so much. And it's like, I think you won't be saying that in a couple of years.
Bitcoin, as they say on Twitter, Bitcoin fixes everything. All right, Drew, do you got any things to wrap up the proof of work article that you wrote out there? Any conclusions that you came up with as you did all your research around it?
Um, Nothing really in particular. I think the biggest thing is these consensus mechanisms for these products and services. Proof of work has seemed to be one that has worked probably the best, and there has been other solutions like proof of stake, and then there's other ones out there people try doing, but in the end, really, proof of work has seemed to do the best. So I think that is really interesting to think that it's stood the test of time. And, as we said, to put it in like one type of sentence, when you hear proof of work, just thinking of a group of people going together and trying to solve a puzzle and validate these peer to peer transactions.
And it's the most secure system that exists out there, much more secure than proof of stake. And I'll say it now, but much more secure than what we have going on with our US dollars. Maybe we wrap that up, Drew, right there. What do you think? Keeping the theme of Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, proof of work, I've got a pretty awesome retweet of the week that I absolutely died over. I have to give a little bit of context to our listener because it probably won't make as much sense if you're not as deep into the Bitcoin realm as I am. But so in the second quarter, well, let's back up even more. Everyone's very much aware of who Elon Musk is. And if you're not, get out of your rock. He's a guy that invented Tesla and he's causing all of this commotion out on the internet. Well, anyways, he said that he was a believer in Bitcoin. He bought Bitcoin in 2021. He said he's got diamond hands, which in the crypto community space means that you're not going to sell, rather the uh, cryptocurrency goes up or goes down, and he was sticking pretty to that. And he with Tesla, they bought a bunch of Bitcoin. At one point in time, they were accepting Bitcoin. Well, anyways, long story short, Elon came across as a huge Bitcoin and cryptocurrency supporter. Well, it just came out in that the second quarter of this year, Tesla sold 75% of their Bitcoin holdings. And Drew, I know you mentioned a little bit about what Elon said earlier in the episode in our main segment. He also came out and said that he wants to get cash heavy, just in case some things happen. He needs to be prepared for it. But the Bitcoin community and crypto community in general just saw that as a huge walk back from the diamond hands tweet that he had, saying that, basically that he's soft, that he has reverted, that he's weak hands. But anyways, so Michael Saylor, who is like the king now of Bitcoin, he's kind of like the leader of the pack. He's the guy that buys millions of Bitcoin every couple of months, it seems like. He had a tweet, a little shot at Elon, that said, if you sell 75% of your Bitcoin, you will only have 25% of your Bitcoin left. And I thought that was absolutely a great shot because it's dry, it's funny. But the retweet that I thought was absolutely hilarious, because it just gives into the current environment that we live in, is there's an account out there called Greg. Actually, his account is Greg16676935420. He's kind of like a parody account. He trolls people. It's hilarious. But he replied to Michael Saylor saying source question mark, which I thought it was absolutely great, because nowadays everyone's asking for sources, because who knows what the hell's going on out there. But
Yeah.
the Michael Saylor just came out and
Just
yeah.
like the simple like mathematics, and then he just like, source, are you sure about that?
So
That's
that
actually
one I was
hilarious.
rolling for like a
I
couple of minutes on.
you know, while you're doing a little bit of that history there, of between Elon Musk and everything, I just wanted to double check these numbers quick. So if anybody's watching on YouTube, they're wondering what I was doing. That 75% of Bitcoin that Tesla sold was worth $936 million. So almost $1 billion in Bitcoin value. And that was right now at like these lower prices. So when that was up in that 69,000 price range, that had to been a humongous amount of dollars. But the fact that these companies were willing to have a value of almost $1 billion in Bitcoin, a mainstream company, SEC reporting, is pretty crazy.
And I wish I would have wrote down the stats, because I had seen the cost basis, but it was something like Tesla's cost basis for those Bitcoin was like $32,000 on average they bought them for, and they sold for around $28,000. So about a $4,000 per Bitcoin change. I don't know what that comes out to in a loss, a bottom line loss. But it's significant when we're talking about $1 billion now that he's sold, compared to triple that, basically 3 billion at his height.
Any other retweets?
I do have one more. It's non-money related. So there was a massive uh there was a massive job that I think it was NASA. I could be wrong on this. I should have looked it up a little bit more. But essentially put out a new telescope into space to take photos of the galaxy, and the cosmos. And beautiful photos came out of it. They were able to see almost like 13, 14 billion years ago. So they got a ton of data that now they're going to be able to study for the years ahead. Which I thought was fascinating, because I'm fascinated by space in general. But there's this tweet by Tim Urban, and it states, it's funny that after the Big Bang, there were all these hydrogen atoms everywhere. And so this is in reference to all of these photos coming out. And 13.8 billion years later, some of them have turned into majestic nebulas, which those photos showed, and others have turned into Cheez Its. And it like made me pause, and I'm like, man, how true is that? Like, you look at these photos and they're just absolutely beautiful. And that stuff that's out there makes up this little itty bitty Cheez It that I can eat, and they're the same thing. It's like absolutely wild what the cosmos can do. And I did actually read some of the threads that was a part of this tweet, and they're like, yeah, but if you go to that nebula, you probably won't even see it, and it'll just look like nothing. And so I was like, fair enough, it's
You
perspective.
know,
But from my perspective here,
that thing
it's
might
fascinating.
be beautiful to look at, but I guarantee you it does not taste as good as a Cheez It. I kind of had one tweet that was off of that same picture you're talking about, but it was just a side by side. It was like a picture of a galaxy, and it was like so clear, so beautiful, so perfect. And then next one, it was like a security camera photo. and
I saw
it was like
that.
super blurry. It's a guy that was like super
Yeah.
blurry, only about like 10 feet away. You couldn't even make out what his face looked like. It's like, we have these type of cameras, and then these ones can't even get like a picture of a face.
No, I know. That's wild. Just a little more on that photo. It's crazy because so when you look at that photo, and maybe I'll put it up here on the screen on our YouTube just because it's fascinating. But each one of those dots, besides the very bright ones with the six lines out, those are all galaxies, meaning that like we're in the Milky Way galaxy. Our star is one of like millions, if not billions, of stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Each one of those tiny dots, which is just a sliver of the sky, is galaxies.
My
So
brain's
it's
literally starting to hurt
crazy.
right now. Like
Yeah.
I can't think about space because it literally like hurts me. I look up at the sky and then I think I'm like, wow, all the stuff's out there and how big and like how far, and then I just go down a rabbit hole. I'm like, it just I can't even fathom it.
It's absolutely insane
It's like
how
my
big it
mind
is.
can't wrap, my head can't wrap. Or what the hell is it goes?
You
Nope.
can't even
Like
talk right now. You're just
I
so
can't even
thrown
talk right now.
off.
I'm literally that thrown off. But
Yeah.
like I can't wrap my head around like space, like so much so that I almost want to just be like, it's easier for me to say it's just fake. Like there's like
Fair.
like I'm just like I'll just gonna just live in denial. But no, it's like literally so crazy. And some the nights here, like in northern Minnesota, if like I'm up at the hunting shack or up at the lake and there's not much light and you can just look up and really see the sky, and
Yeah.
then it just really shows how big it is out there.
Crazy. Last segment, and I thought, I might as well keep it on the Bitcoin theme because we talked about it in our main segment. We talked about it in my retweets of the week. But for what's going on in the neighborhood this week, I actually got my first hardware key for holding Bitcoin. Sorry, my first hardware wallet is what I meant to say for holding Bitcoin. And for those of you that don't know what that is, it looks like a little USB drive. And I wish I had it on me right now because I would show you guys, but it's not anywhere to be seen. So, which is probably a good thing.
Oh, somebody came and probably stole it.
Yeah.
No,
No, I haven't actually set it up yet. So
yeah,
there's no Bitcoin on there.
I saw your snap of that. It's a Ledger,
Yep.
is what it's the brand name, right?
Yeah.
And
The Ledger Nano S.
I was gonna ask you how the process was of like if it creates a separate wallet or what it was like transferring stuff to it, because like every time I've transferred a crypto, it's just been like from my phone going to like an exchange, like decentralized exchange or something. Like I haven't done anything where I've actually put it on a hardware, like if it's like flash drive, and then I guess I haven't done that yet. So I'm just curious to see the process of it.
So I know how it works. So I've watched many videos on it just in preparation for this, but it's essentially the same thing. You set up your wallet on the Ledger Nano S is what I have. So the hardware.
Do you have to create a new one, or if you already have an existing wallet, you can import that?
Nope, you create a new wallet on your device. And then basically the way you do it is you have your address on your new device, and you send it from your wallet to your new device, and then it's on your new device offline. And that's what the big kicker is. It's not online, so it can't be hacked by any single person unless they physically have your device and they physically know either your pin code to get into your ledger or your help me out with the code phrase, the seed phrase, to get into your wallet, or to restore your wallet. And so that's like what the big thing is. And I know we talked a little bit about exchanges going under earlier in the episode, but when you have Bitcoin on a hardware wallet like the Ledger Nano S, you're not susceptible to these exchanges going bankrupt and you not being able to have your Bitcoin. You truly only own your Bitcoin when you have it on a wallet. And I'm choosing hardware wallet because it's most secure. You can do some wallets that are online and you still have like MetaMask. It's not a Bitcoin wallet, but MetaMask is one that it's your keys, your cryptocurrency. Trust Wallet. Yep, that's another good one. But so it's an extra step to being more secure with your cryptocurrencies and your Bitcoin. And I just went with the Ledger Nano S one because it was like $70, relatively cheap, relative or compared to what they've been. And they've updated the Ledger Nano to the Ledger Nano S that is just has more functionality. And I'm really only storing Bitcoin and a little bit of Ethereum until Ethereum pops back up and I transition it back over to Bitcoin. So very excited
I
about
should
that.
I should look into one of those because I have Trust Wallet right now where it's
But here it
okay.
is. I know you're
I sh-
talking, but while you're talking, Drew, it might be kind of hard with my lighting here.
yeah, it just looks like a flash drive. Like he's holding up, it's black, silver, looks like a flash drive you have in
Yeah,
keychain. Yeah, so like anyway, so I have my seed I like have my own seed phrase, like my own wallet, and I just use Trust Wallet, and like all it is like a window into my cryptocurrencies, and so I can kind of still transact and send stuff. But the one thing that's kind of scary with that is even though they're still your crypto, if for some reason there's like one scare where the Apple Store didn't have Trust Wallet on for a while, so if you deleted your Trust Wallet app on your phone, like you weren't able to get back into that one. So you would have had to go and find some other wallet. So like in theory, if Google Android or in like Apple didn't want to put any type of decentralized wallet on their app store, you kind of might be like little like SOL. Like you'd have to find some workaround, which I'm sure there is. Like you still have your crypto, it's still yours, but you can't really do anything with it until you're able to like find a wallet on like a phone that accepts a wallet, or you can find a way to get it onto like a hardware thing. So maybe I should look into some type of actual hardware.
I'm super excited to get it rolling. I'm a little nervous because the thing with Bitcoin is that if you get the address wrong, you can't undo your mistake. Like your Bitcoin's gone. So you have to be very careful, very diligent when you're sending Bitcoin from wallet to wallet. But I'm very excited to get my Bitcoin finally off exchanges and into my cool little new USB drive that I am going to hide where no one knows. So yeah, that's what's going on in my neighborhood. Yeah. Wouldn't that be awesome if everyone just did that with their Bitcoin? It's like back to the days of like hiding money under your mattress.
You definitely can, and you're still making money on it. Like it's not like before you wouldn't make any interest on
Yeah, I
your
mean, you would just lose it,
and
and you would lose it to
yeah,
inflation.
and now you could legitimately hide your Bitcoin under your mattress and it'd still appreciate in
Heck
value.
yeah, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to put it under there. So if you come to my house, it's not going to be under there.
It's so obvious. It's actually a good hiding spot. But yeah, I don't have anything necessarily crypto related for my neighborhood, but I am putting in some mini split air conditioners in our house, and it's the first time of me doing anything like this. So a lot of YouTube videos have been watched, and I have the inside units hung. I had the outside unit hung, but it has a little dent in it. So I'm trying to work with the company to see if it's just cosmetic, which I'm like 90% sure it's just cosmetic and it won't affect it. So that's why I hung it. So hopefully I can get like a little bit of refund on that. And I got the electrical set up. And really the next thing I have to do is just drill a hole through our house and then connect the piping. And I think that's probably like my biggest worry, just because if I get a kink in this copper piping, or I don't get like a great seal, it's gonna kind of like screw things up pretty big. So it's a little bit worrisome, but I'm planning it out good enough right now where I'm pretty confident in it. It's just once I get that done with and I know that the seal's good, I'm gonna be
Have everything kind of wrapped up in the kitchen remodel.
yep. And then I'm sure there'll be something else like uh
Hey, at
I don't
least you're
know, like
making it through
our
the
bathtub.
hot part of the summer here without any AC units. So good for you.
Yeah, it was brutal a couple days ago, and then every day since then it's been bearable. So
I think I would just be laying on your basement floor if I'm gonna be honest with you.
yeah, we stayed down here and we ate downstairs a couple times. We have like a block basement for your listeners, so it's like a little bit cooler down here. Uh, but those AC things. I mean, this kitchen thing is just like drug out so much. I just hopefully there's like no other huge projects, but I've been kind of liking house projects. It just I kind of like him do it at my pace, but my wife wants to do them at her pace, which is like get them done right away. Uh, But I think that's like most places, like or like most households, because I see a lot of stuff on TikTok of like, hey, like the husband be like, why would we pay somebody when we can do it ourselves and have it done in 4 years? you know,
Yeah,
and
that's
that's kind of
so
what it
me.
that's kind of what it feels like.
I've been mudding our garage now for like 2 months, and I'm still like halfway done. And Hannah just keeps on getting after me, and I'm like, "Hey, when we have a free weekend, I can actually get out there and get stuff done." But I feel that to my bones.
And it's like she thinks it's huge procrastination, but I feel like I'm still doing stuff. It just maybe not always on that, or like I don't know where my days go. So I think I can probably wrap things up with that. Uh, so even though we had a good, talk about your ledger and we had a good retweets, the main part of this podcast was actually about what proof of work was and how Bitcoin pretty much was the first service or product, whatever you want to call it, to actually implement the proof of work. It was something that was started in 1993 as a concept, but came out in that 2008, 2009 time when Bitcoin was actually created. And really, proof of work has been extremely successful, and a lot of cryptos have copy that and actually implemented that into their own framework. And at the end of the day, as we've said a couple times, it's a group of people that are solving a mathematical puzzle that's going to be publicly transparent and validated by other peers. And it is makes things pretty much uncorruptible and makes them censorship free and so on. So I hope this episode was able to kind of summarize what proof of work was. I don't know if you've heard it before or this is the first time you've heard it, or maybe you have heard it before. We just hope that we're able to add a little bit to your knowledge of what proof of work actually is. We hope you guys found this episode as interesting as we did, and we will see you guys next week in the neighborhood.